Welcome back to another video, or welcome in, as I usually say. I gotta change that up. If you guys have any recommendations for a little intro, I think I'm gonna try and add a little outro page thing for when the recommended video comes up, so hopefully that works. I'm still trying to figure out how to get some music over it that is free and won't get me copyrighted or whatever. I got copyrighted a couple of videos ago when I was just on Twitter. It showed like NFL highlights, so that got demonetized. Not that anything is monetized because I'm not making money from this, but that's very okay. Not why I made this channel, but today we're going to be going over overall NFL draft strategies. Sort of just my takes on trading up, staying put, at your pick, and trading back. The director and Daniel Popper and a lot of other people for some reason came out with videos and articles about this exact idea like yesterday, I think. And I had thought of this video and made a bunch of notes during one of my classes instead of actually listening a couple days ago. So I'm not just copying them. But this is overall draft strategy, not just for the Chargers. I'm going to make another video probably after this, basically about this video, but specifically relating to the Chargers. But overall, just talking draft tiers and draft strategies, basically how building a big board as one team, how it can be difficult because yes, the overall consensus is best player available is overall the best idea, but if you have, like, there's just so many factors that go into building a big board, like an actual big board. If this person is here, we're going to take them because they are at the top of our big board still. Because taking best player available is the best school of thought. But if you have a huge hole at an important position, and a player is falling to you at a position that you don't necessarily need, like, which one would you take? If it's kind of a reach, but it's a huge hole at a like, if you have no, if you're one of your starting corners is just borderline shouldn't be in the NFL, like just glaring need, he's going to get just dogged on every single game, and you go into the draft, yes, you've made mistakes before that, but like you're kind of stuck because you're either just admitting that you're not going to compete that season by keeping that player out there, but then you're also going into the draft just knowing we need to upgrade this position. We need to take this position on day one, possibly day two. Versus if a player is falling to you at a position that you don't necessarily need, like falling in terms of a blue chip prospect, a great offensive tackle is falling to you at like in the teens, in the early 20s, but you already have two pretty good tackles. What do you do? Like, I'm gonna get into how, yes, yes, if, what was I just gonna say? Why can't I remember? Wow, I just completely lost my train of thought. We're just gonna get into trading up first. So in the first round, as a general rule, trading up for a QB is the only sort of logical thing to do because it's the only position that has the chance to overcome the value of the other players that you would have taken with those picks. So if you have to trade up from 15 to 3 and give up either a next year's first or a second and a third or something, that player that you trade up for better give you more value than the player you would have taken at 15 and the player that you would have taken in the first round next year. And not many positions, even if you are a pretty good player at that position, not many positions can provide the value that would overcome even like two average players on your team at other positions or just with multiple picks. But if you hit on a quarterback, you can trade second, third, fourth, next year's first, second, and like if you hit on a top 5 quarterback, that's all that matters. It can well surpass the value of those picks, but other positions it's much more difficult to do. And then this is what I was about to say, I think. Normally, if a player is falling, it's for a reason. So 90% of the time, it's not a freak accident that a player who shouldn't really be falling is falling. Like, I guess I'm trying to think of better examples, but it's not just that, like, the NFL draft community, the NFL draft media, we're all super high on a guy, and it's not like we were all right and he should have been taken top 10 instead of like in the 20s. It's more likely that the NFL teams did more research and found out something like an injury or a disease that he has, or he's, I don't know, a piece of shit, or like has a criminal record or something that is just kept under wraps really well. There's normally a reason for a player to fall. So if trading up, it's like there's rarely ever actual steals in the draft. So if you see that a player is falling and you want to trade up and go get that guy, because like, oh, like this next team might take him, like he's already fallen further than we ever would have thought, like let's trade up and go get him. You have to think there's normally a reason that he's falling that far. There's a reason that like those other teams have probably thought the same thing as you, like why is this guy falling? Or they've already done their research beforehand and found out the same thing that you did, and that's the reason that he's falling. There are exceptions, the 5% of the time, where a player does just fall and there's not really a reason. Best example I can think of as a Chargers fan, Derwin James, he was there for us at pick 17. I would like to say objectively, a top 3 safety in the NFL. Personally, best safety in the NFL. But just a guy who can do everything. This isn't going to turn into a Derwin James video, but a guy who is pretty high on everybody's boards, like top 10 on almost everybody's board, and he just has it all. Like athleticism, production, just seems like a can't miss prospect, and you look into him and you don't really see any issues, and teams are still passing on him. There are still the 5% of times where a player will fall, but in general, being overconfident in your team's evaluation versus the rest of the NFL teams and moving up for a player where there's always inherent risk. There's always risk in every single pick that you make in the NFL draft. It's impossible to know for sure what a guy is going to do in the NFL, how he's going to play, how good he's going to be. There's always risk involved. So being overconfident in your team's evaluation and moving up, trading up, saying, hey, this guy's falling, let's go get him, being overconfident in that versus the rest of the NFL's like evaluations versus the rest of the NFL teams and their scouting departments saying there's reason for this, we're okay passing on them. That is in general a bad idea. Now, if a consensus top player is falling, which can happen, moving up a few spots but not using any picks in the top 100 isn't horrible. Pretty hard to do, I would say. Can kind of really only happen in the 20s. But if you move up like 1 or 2 spots just to go and get a guy who's a consensus player that is falling a little bit, mainly the thing I want to highlight is not giving up any top 100 picks to move up, because unless it's for a quarterback, which I already talked about, but then I would say it's not horrible just because those sorry, I just ate, keep burping, but it's not a bad idea if you can save those top 100 picks just because they are so valuable. Within the top 100 picks, you're still getting ideally some pretty quality starters, some guys who can come in and contribute. If not year one, for sure you'd hope year two. Outside of the top 100, it's more backup depth guys that you hope can develop. But guys in the top 100, that's how you build your team. Those are the guys that you build your team with. And then also another school of thought about trading up. So here, I'm going to try and let's go here. So this is just an example of a draft trade chart, and sort of the point values and what you'd have to give up to move up in the draft. So you guys can look at this and calculate if your team wants to move up for certain guys, what you would have to give up. But the other school of thought is draft tiers. So if one of the top tiers of players is running out and you'd rather not trade back to get the most of the next tier, a small trade up to get in on that top tier that you have on your big board before there's a little bit of a drop off, that would be a thought process. And then also the thought overall of, hey, this draft class is weak, but next year's will probably be better, is a pretty sound idea, because we have a much better idea of this draft class than the next. But saying that this theoretical draft class, this year's draft class actually is kind of weak. But if you say that this draft class is strong, but next year's looks weak, that's not a good idea just because so many players break out each year. And you never really know what the next draft class is going to look like. But I'd rather bank on next year being better and getting more picks than this year is strong. So I will trade up and use next year's picks. Since this class is strong and next year's looks weak, you never really know. Next year's draft class could be loaded. I think I made that clear and understandable, but basically I would rather say and know that, hey, this draft class, it doesn't look that great. Chances are next year's is going to be a little bit better, so I'd rather push some picks into the future if I could, just a couple. And hey, even if next year's is weak again for some reason, either that's a trend or you could just push a couple picks into next year then. But in general, I'd rather say that than say, hey, this draft class is loaded, we think, our team thinks, and next year's doesn't look as good. Let's use some of those next year picks to trade up and get more picks to move up in this draft just because this draft class is so good. I don't think that's a great idea just because, one, it goes back to being overconfident in your team's evaluation of the draft class and the players within it. Also, you just never know what next year's draft class is going to look like. You can guess, you can have an idea, an outline of possibly some of the strengths and weaknesses, but there's just so many players who break out each year who go from, hey, is this guy going to get drafted, to day one, day two lock, like very, very often. Yeah, there's the exceptions of like Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Kayshon Boutte, just guys that are like, if they keep performing, hey, they're probably going to be a first round lock. But in general, you never really know until that year. And then moving on, my preferred method, obviously, I think at this point, is trading back. Almost always a good idea for many reasons, but in general, more swings of the bat within the top 100 is best. So for every team in general, it is a good idea, but especially for rebuilding teams. If it is a weak draft like this one overall, trading back and accumulating picks for next year is also advantageous. So in general, like if you have the 6th overall pick, let's say, and you don't, like, even if you love the guys on the draft board there, but you don't have any other picks in the top 100, I think, yeah, the Panthers actually do have pick 6 and no other picks in the top 100. I would be a heavy proponent of trading back, just because if you trade back, get 1, possibly 2 more picks in the top 100, you're turning pick 6, probably 1 starter, hopefully 1 good starter in your team, into likely 3 starters on your team. Yes, there's a little bit lower of a confidence level, but hey, even if you don't hit on all 3, you could still hit on 2, more likely, and you're still getting 2 starters instead of 1. Outside of the top 100, yes, it's still good to have more swings of the bat, more chances to hit on players, but especially with those top 100 picks, this draft class isn't a bad example of that. There's a lot of depth at certain positions. O-line is pretty good, edge is pretty good, linebacker is pretty good, to where you can get legitimate day 1 starters. I'm very confident in that in the 90s at certain positions, those positions that I just listed. And then for rebuilding teams, I don't see the downside to, if it's a known weak class like this one is, and you're not going to compete this year, dog, get as much value as you can, trade back a couple times, still like have 1 round pick, like a pick each round, but if you can get an extra 2nd or 3rd or 4th or an extra 1st for next year, more ammo for next year's draft, which chances are will be stronger than this one. And even if it's not for some reason, like I said before, then just push it into the next year again. Like, I'm thinking of the Houston Texans just because they're horrible and they need to do one of the bigger rebuilds that I've seen, just because they don't really have anybody. And then the flip side of the tiers argument is also true here. So if you view a lot of players on the board similarly in terms of value and tier them together, kind of, or a certain group of positions, in theory, it would be most advantageous to take the player near the end of the tier. because since there's always risk involved in a draft pick, putting less stock into each pick while getting more chances is, from a statistic standpoint, the best thing to do. But basically, what I'm saying is, if you have a group of 5 receivers who you like in the first round, you think could come in and you value as first round prospects, and you tier them together, like, yeah, you have a slight preference for this guy, but are you just being too confident in your own evaluation? Like I've said before, I think it would be better to trade down and get the 4th or 5th guy in that tier, just because, one, you accumulate more draft picks, you're putting less stock into that first round draft pick, which, since it's risky, less stock into it is normally a better idea. But you're still getting a guy in that tier. It's just better to get more picks back while still getting a guy in that tier. I would personally just rather pick from the bottom of that tier than be the first guy to have like the pick of the litter, because I don't know, it's still just risky, and overall, over time, I think that it would be a better strategy to trade down and take from the bottom of that tier. And then lastly, staying with your pick, you don't, I mean, it's kind of just the in between, obviously, of the two things that I've said, but you don't have to worry with trade value, like all this stuff. With the picks, it doesn't add any risk in terms of banking on next year's draft being better than this one. If you do trade for picks next year. And then for the first thing I said, don't have to worry about trade value. You don't get, I don't know what a PC way to say this would be, but you don't get screwed over in a trade, kind of like the Saints just did with the Eagles. Over, like, if you look across almost every single draft chart, like, this is just one from Draft Tech, but a lot of different organizations have their own ways of valuing picks, and in every single one, the Eagles came out well on top, so you don't have to worry about getting screwed over with stuff like that. You can also just throw it into a calculator and be like, hey, we're losing the equivalent of like a second round pick in this trade, just into thin air, or not into thin air, into the Eagles, just for shits. Like, I don't know what the Saints are doing. And then as a franchise, this is sort of, it's definitely a reason that teams factor into it, but it doesn't really have anything to do with statistics or actual football. But as a franchise, it doesn't really add any criticism to the front office, because when you trade up or trade down, you're always going to make a group of people upset just because you're doing something, kind of. It paints a little bit more of a target on your back if you trade up and give up some valuable picks for a non-quarterback, people like me are going to be coming after you, like, openly. But even if you trade back, there's going to be a group of people who are like, oh, like, this guy was still on the board, you could have taken him instead of trade back, like, what are you doing, like, this guy's on the hot seat, this GM's on the hot seat, let's get rid of him, bad decision. But very rarely is the normal fan going to get upset if you just stay at that pick, even if the right thing to do was trade back, or in some scenarios, even if the right thing to do is to trade up. Only the people who like dive into football and their teams in the draft are going to know that's what you should have done. For the common fan, though, 90% of your fan base, if you just stay at that pick, take one of the consensus top guys or a position of need or something, like, your fan base is going to be okay. Your fan base is going to be happy. They got a new player. So that part honestly probably plays a pretty big factor into what teams actually do. I think I didn't really have anything else to do. I might run through a quick example or just talk about what would be a good example of tiers. Probably this edge class. So Aiden Hutchinson, kind of in a tier of his own, just very, very, very surefire prospect. Listen to the PFF Hutch podcast. I think it was pretty well done, very interesting. I'd like more players to do something like this. And then Kayvon Thibodeau, George Karlaftis, Trayvon Walker, that's another tier. So if you're picking the top 10, you're going to want blue chip prospects. And I mean, it really depends on where your team is, because there's a lot of advantages to getting a blue chip certified this guy can be an elite player year one prospect. Blue chip quarterbacks, the Micah Parsons, the Rashawn Slaters, Penei Sewell, the Jamar Chases, those players, the Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn, all guys from last year's draft. There's value in having a surefire prospect, but then there's also obviously more value in that pick to trade down with. So different schools of thought for where your team is, but once we get into this next tier, which I would probably put Ajabo, Johnson, Mafe, I would probably put Benito a little bit below Epiketti and Jackson, but still above Kingsley. But basically my point is, if those top 4 edges are off the board and you're like sold on taking an edge, or I don't know, that's just kind of what your team needs. And if you have put yourself into that situation, I would rather, if I'm at pick, let's just say 24 here, or pick 20, and Jermaine Johnson is on the board. I'm not very high on Jermaine Johnson, but I would rather trade down. If you're super set on taking an edge, then I would just trade back into like the mid-second round, because if I have my choice of Jermaine Johnson at 20 or trading down into like pick 54, 55 and taking Drake Jackson, I'm probably going to take Drake Jackson. For reasons I'm not going to get into super specifically, just breaking them down as prospects, but I don't think Drake Jackson is that far behind Jermaine Johnson at all. And if I could get, that's a pretty big jump. 35 picks away from each other, but I don't view them that different. I'd rather take Drake Jackson and get an extra, like, next year's second, possibly next year's first. Because if a team wanted to jump from 55, theoretically, if a team wanted to do this, I don't think any team actually would do this, but if a team wanted to jump from pick 55 to pick 20 into the first round, you're giving up possibly next year's first, possibly just an extra second and third or something, but I would much rather do that than stick at 20 and just take Jermaine Johnson to have my pick of all of these guys. I like Cameron Thomas as well, Josh Pascal, but that's just sort of one example of the draft tiers argument. But like, comment, subscribe. Let me know. I'm going to have to double check. I'm going to try and add the outro screen. It's not going to have any music over it. But let me know what you guys think of that, and if it works. I think I should be able to check if it works. But let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.